What is going on, YouTube? Andrew Miller, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com. We're coming back at y'all today. First video with the two of us post spring, at least since our spring game recap. And, we're looking at the roster. We're starting with the offense in this video. It's going to be a two-part series here. We're looking at the offense today. In the next couple of days, we'll do the defense as well. I'm talking about what we think the two deep will look like coming out of spring ball. How we feel about each position group as well. We've given some takes on this sort of stuff throughout the spring, but we've had a little while to let this digest. We've had some new portal entrants. Picked up Trill Carter earlier this week. That's going to be more pertinent to the defensive video, but and then we got the summer enrollees arriving soon. I think there's at least a few of those guys that could compete for start or spots on the two deep. So, a lot of interesting things to talk about here. I'll start with this, with just the offensive side of the ball as a whole. I think there's a lot of this conversation to be had along the offensive line, whereas like a lot of the other position groups are pretty much settled. Running back, I would even argue, is pretty settled for the top two heading into the fall from what I've heard. I think for the most part, especially at the skill positions, offense more settled than the defense.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's a good sign because of all the talent Texas has. So it's not like everything's settled because, there's only a little bit of talent and these guys have to play. It's the guys who have proven themselves really have stood out throughout the spring and, previously in their collegiate career. And I think it's going to set up for a Texas offense in year three under Sark to be very dangerous. And I think what I learned from the spring game is that we should be excited about Texas pushing the ball downfield, a lot of big plays, and hopefully a lot of points.
Yeah. I think I was probably a little too critical of the spring game last weekend. The more I think about it, the more I felt positive about most position groups on the offense. And, I think, I think heading into the fall that I'm going to have high expectations for this offense. Like you said, there's a lot of talent across the board. There's a lot of depth. There's more excitement about more of these position groups this year than I felt the past couple of off seasons. So, I think Texas is in a good spot right now on offense. Sark always has the mantra that, everyone's always competing for their job. But like I said, for the most part on this offense, there's going to be some guys that have some confidence that, they're the guy at their position group heading into the fall. That can lead to some confidence. And there's so much returning experience on this offense that, these guys should have that sort of like kind of swagger in their step that, this is a big year for them. And, that this is the year last year in the Big 12 to finally make that elusive run to the Big 12 championship and actually, bring a Big 12 title back to Austin. Let's go ahead and start here with quarterbacks. Uh, you know, I don't have much to say about Quinn Ewers. I think that I would say he met expectations for the spring. I think he showed some confidence. I think showed a little bit more maturity, more leadership, and that kind of stems all the way back to winter workouts. He was leading his own workout group and winter workouts that I believe was winning that workout competition for a little bit in the SNC program, and that is, that's always a sign of off the field leadership, if you will. I mean, on the practice field as well. But I like where Quinn Ewers' game is headed. I don't think he's going to have a perfect season by any means, but I think he's going to be better, and I think he's going to be a better leader of this offense. Behind him, we'll have this backup competition talk for a while. I think Malik Murphy probably has the edge going into the fall, but I think this is still a job that Arch Manning can win. I think if Arch Manning goes in, does a bang up job in fall camp, that job can still be his. We're going to need that backup job to be solidified. You saw the importance of having a solid backup quarterback last year in Hudson Card. The good news, I think, for Texas is that you got two guys that are in the running for this backup job. It's twice as many as you had last year. And so that's a reason to feel good about the situation in the quarterback room right now.
Yeah. I mean, so I think anyone who has had any sort of pulse on the football team knew that Quinn Ewers is going to be the guy this Obviously, national media likes to drum up some stuff, but Sark obviously said it after the game. And I thought Quinn was, catching some unwarranted flack. I thought he played really well. Obviously, you mentioned not perfect, but that deep ball to Xavier Worthy was big time. It just felt like a lot of weight off the backs of the fan base of those two guys just to finally be able to connect on one. But I also thought, he managed the offense well, took what the defense gave him. I thought one of his better throws was the first throw of the game, kind of the back shoulder to JT Sanders. Sanders couldn't come up with it, but I just really like the pace Quinn was playing with. We've heard about his confidence all offseason. I think you could really see that. Not many incompletions. I did my best to chart his throws. I had only 2 incompletions on 10 throws, 10 yards or less. And it was like 11 completions on throws of that nature. So we know Texas is going to take the deep shot this year, but I think it's just a be efficient underneath, especially with the playmakers this offense has. Get the ball to guys in space and let them work. As for the backup job, I mean, hats off to Malik Murphy. Played very, very well. This means nothing, but my parents who were in the stadium for the game, I mean, they know who Quinn Ewers is. They know who Arch Manning is. They didn't know who Malik Murphy was. They're very casual fans. They said Malik Murphy was like, who is that guy? Like, where'd he come from? That's how well he played to, I guess, the casual viewer in the stadium. But I think to people following this too, the arm strength has always been there. You saw that on a throw to DeAndre Moore about 20 yards down the field. Looked like an in route. He zips the ball. He had good touch on his deep balls. And I mean, if you're basing it off a sole performance, which you certainly shouldn't do, Malik was definitely the better player. We talked about this post game on Saturday. Arch didn't have a ton of time in the pocket, and he's 17 years old. And give the guy some time in general, just with his development. But like you mentioned, I do think it's going to be an ongoing competition to see who backs up Quinn going into the fall. But as a Texas fan, I really have to find out who that is. Besides some garbage time, I think, you got to hope Quinn's the guy that starts 12, 13, 14, potentially 15 games next year. And I feel confident in general with Quinn and the quarterback room going into 23.
I'd love Quinn to start 15 games.
Yeah. Yes.
For us. Yeah, I think that the quarterback room is in a good situation right now. I mean, quarterback or the backup job will be decided this fall. I think we're both solidified that we feel good. I wouldn't necessarily say that like I feel perfect about it. I think Quinn still has some strides to make, and there's still literally no game reps under the belts of Arch Manning and Malik Murphy, so still something to prove. Running back. Running back's more of an open conversation. We've had this conversation throughout the spring where I think there was one point before Savion Red started looking good there that there were some depth concerns. I'd be lying if I said that I felt perfect about the running back room, but at the same time, there's plenty of guys in this running back room that I'm fully convinced can make plays that are good in space, that especially with the number of dynamic skill sets that we have in the running back room, that, there's so many different ways that Sark can use these guys to beat opposing defenses and really just play chess while defensive coordinators are playing checkers. You got guys like Keelan Robinson, Savion Red to complement a bell cow like CJ Baxter, to complement like a really quick one-cut guy like Jonathan Brooks. I don't think it's a bad situation. What I have heard, though, is that Jonathan Brooks and CJ Baxter are the guys in the running back room heading into the fall. So that's where I'm sticking with my top two. If that's what the word was coming out of spring camp, especially with some of the injury issues, limitations that Jonathan Brooks had, referring just to the hernia issue that he had surgery on. I believe that was back in January. If he's still coming out of spring ball after recovering from that as one of the top guys along with CJ Baxter, that's a good sign of where the running back group stands at the top heading into the fall.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you kind of how it's listed now. It is an interesting situation because there are 5 guys who could go out there and contribute and probably play well. And then when you throw Keelan Robinson in that mix, Keelan isn't going to be, one of the top 2 guys because he's not an every down back, but he's not going to be the 5th guy either. He's going to be like getting the 3rd most snaps regardless of who the top 2 are, just because of how Sark uses him.
Sorry,
Um,
I usually don't like to interrupt you, but it's going to be
yeah,
a lot like last year, I think, for Keelan, where like he's still that chess piece being moved around. Don't forget about how big of an impact he makes on special teams.
yeah.
But
And so that's why, no, you're totally fine. But that's why I think, getting in that top two is going to be so key. I mean, Jaden Blue's going to be competing all summer for that. He's the guy that can challenge the two you're mentioning, because if you divvy up the snaps, if there's 100% of the snaps, and whoever Jonathan Brooks is getting 50% and CJ Baxter's getting 35%. And the last 15 are going to Keelan Robinson. Like there's gonna be no place to be that third guy, because Keelan Robinson, snap count wise, is going to be that third guy regardless, just because of how Sark uses him. So I mean, I'm high on Jaden Blue. He obviously had that one nice run in the spring game. He's electric with the ball in space, but I think this just speaks to the depth that Texas does have at the position. Obviously, you want to tread lightly with what they're losing to the draft. So I wouldn't necessarily consider the running back room a strength just because of what walked out the door. But I think it could easily turn itself into a strength 4 weeks into the season. But yeah, I think there are going to be a couple guys who are left out. I think Savion Red on the outside looking into that rotation. Obviously, a lot of good word has been said about him during his switch from wide receiver to running back. But I just don't think there's enough to go around. And I don't know if there's enough he can do in that time to surpass a guy like Jonathan Brooks, or even what CJ Baxter has done in the couple months he's been on campus. So, in closing, I'm with you. I think Brooks is probably going to be RB1. Baxter is going to be RB2. That might even start off as like a 60-40 type split and move its way to 50-50 once Baxter, gets a couple games under his belt. But I do think whatever they told Jaden Blue to convince him to stay in January, I wonder if he's going to be like, damn, like once the season goes along, he's going to be like, I competed. It was good. I stayed, but you're still not giving me any run. So I'm out of here.
for Jaden Blue, I mean, I think the good news is that he did look more mature. Heard a lot of good stuff from him. Sounds like field vision's coming along. His understanding of the offense, his blocking, like his understanding of the blocking scheme's getting better. And his hands also got better. But you are right that it's probably a big year for him, because I'll paint a picture here. Best case scenario in the 24 class, Texas lands the number one ranked running back recruit in the nation for a second straight cycle out of the state of Florida, and Jarrett Gibson. He comes in. You have two number one running backs in their respective classes in that running back room next year. Does that's no easier of a path for Jaden Blue to get playing time than it would be this year. It really is his opportunity. Yeah, I'll say that I feel pretty good about this room. I like the depth, but I need to see it on the field in the first few weeks of the season. Alabama week 2, obviously a huge test for these running backs. Wide receivers, most fun position group on offense, especially after the spring game. I'm not going to say a whole lot about the starting group, because I think the same starting group you had in the spring to end the spring is going to be the starting group in the fall. Worthy at field, Whittington in the slot, Mitchell at boundary. The conversation comes in, what does the 2 deep look like? Because even that is probably pretty straightforward. But, Isaiah Nayor working his way back from injury. You also have Casey Kane on the boundary, a guy that had a good spring that ended the 2022 season on a high note with 100-plus receiving yard game against Washington in the Alamo Bowl. DeAndre Moore, it seems like the coaching staff trusts him with a lot of reps out of the slot. He's a guy with a pretty polished skill set coming out of St. John Bosco. And then you got Jonte Cook, who I think at this point you have to consider as the backup field receiver behind Worthy. Also is probably going to get a good amount of live game action this fall. And again, you still got Ryan Niblett coming into the mix here. Yeah, Jane Alexis and Brennan Thompson into the portal, though. So, I think it's 7 guys battling for maybe 8 guys battling for 6 spots.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I almost think you can narrow it down to 3 guys battling for 1 spot, because I think the trio of starters you mentioned, Worthy, Mitchell, and Whittington, are the guys. Then Nayor and Jonte Cook I think are also guys who are going to be in the rotation. So who is that sixth guy? Is it Niblet? Is it Moore? Or is it Casey Kane? And that's a question. I mean, that's a discussion we can have right now. I think Ryan Niblet's going to have a tough time just because DeAndre Moore's already been in there. Um, but I mean, Casey Kane obviously 4 catches, 109 yards against Washington, but he's had his time, and we saw this last fall. He was making some highlight plays that the social media team was posting. I don't know. He's just a bit underwhelming to me, and I feel a little bad saying that because he's a great follow on like TikTok. If you guys are on those, like he it seems like a really good dude, and he's a great follow. If I'm the coaching staff, I look to one of these younger guys. DeAndre Moore dropped a couple balls on Saturday. Whatever, I mentioned this on our post game. He was getting open, and that's definitely step one. Step two is catching the ball. But personally, I would shy away from Casey Kane. You already have those two bigger bodied receivers in A.D. Mitchell and Isaiah Nayor, so I'm leaning towards for that sixth spot, one of the younger guys in Niblet or Moore. And like I said, Niblet's going to be at a disadvantage, so I guess I just talked myself into DeAndre Moore being that sixth guy.
Yeah, I mean, Niblet is the most developmental of the three wide receivers that signed in the 2022 class. 2023. I think he arrives on campus this summer with the understanding that he's going to be behind Cook and Moore on the two deep. So, I feel about as good as you can get about any position group. Maybe excluding the cornerbacks. I think the secondary might have something to say about that, and that the top group of defensive linemen, maybe the top 2 or 3. I think those are the strengths of the roster: wide receiver, top defensive linemen, and then cornerbacks. The conversation gets a bit more interesting at tight end. So I've been in the camp for a couple of months now that Texas probably needs tight end help in the portal. I feel good about JT Sanders, NFL talent. Guy that, if he has a good year, could go to the NFL next year and be a top 3 round pick. I think he's going to have a solid year. Gunnar Helm, solid blocker. I mean, limited ceiling as a receiver, especially with how many reps are going to be going around to the different wideouts and running backs than JT Sanders. I mean, tight end might actually be the thinnest position group on offense. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think that's fair, and it's weird to think about because even like 2 years ago when you were going down the list and like Braden Liebrock, who never really panned out, but he was like the 5th guy, and he was like a former pretty high 4-star recruit. So it's kind of weird how that flips so quickly. But it was interesting when you look at the spring game, and you never want to take a whole lot from rotations in the spring game, and I think this was because of lack of tight end depth. But when Quinn Ewers and the Ones ran out on the field to start the game, they were in 12 personnel, and it was JT Sanders, and you would assume Gunnar Helm, but no, it was Patrick Bayouth, the senior. So I don't know if you've heard anything. Is that just because the depth here is limited, so they wanted to put Helm with the 2s, or is Bayouth actually a guy who can come in and probably more of a blocker? But I mean, the first snap of the game, he did run a little out route, so. Anything you heard there? I mean, because before that, I would assume Juan Davis would get more, snaps than him.
My understanding with Juan Davis is they have pretty serious concerns about his ability as a blocker.
Okay.
There's not much of a question about his ability as a receiver. Bayouth, I'll say this. I mean, the guy I don't remember if he got snaps in the last 2 seasons. He got snaps last year. Was he like 270?
Yeah, he's 277 listed. Yeah.
Like a 4th-year player. I think they trust him with blocking assignments. He actually blocks pretty well. By my understanding, has been that way since high school. I mean, I know he's a walk-on, but I would trust him more as a blocker than Juan Davis.
Gotcha.
The problem is too, Will Randall, I think he was someone that could have contributed at least a little bit as a 3rd teamer. I mean, that's how thin it is right now, but tore his ACL. So that probably eliminates him. Juan Davis just hasn't made the strides yet, unfortunately. Obviously, the coaching staff just isn't trusting him there. Spencer Shannon, I think he could be good. I really like him. I think he was a very under-recruited 3-star out of Mater Dei, but 6'7" has a lot of special tools. He's not there yet, though. He's more of a developmental guy. I think it's going to take him a few years.
Yeah.
I don't get why we're not going after someone in the portal. It is a little frustrating to me because tight end is one of the deeper position groups among those spring portal entrants. We got a guy out of North Texas in Varquise Gums. I got to imagine the reason why we're not going after someone like that is because they're looking for more of a inline tight end that can be more of a blocker.
Yeah.
Because Gums was all conference USA first team, and Arkansas is the leader right now. I think we could pretty easily beat them out if we wanted another receiving tight end. So all this speaks to me. They're fine right now that, they can run with Patrick Bythe as the third blocking tight end.
I mean, I also think we saw a lot of 6 offensive lineman looks with Andre Carrick last year. Obviously, he's gone now, but, a guy like Andre Kojo or, Jaden Chapman. Someone, can replace that. So if you're worried about 12 personnel with blocking, I think that's certainly a viable option. It would be wise to go in the portal and add some depth because you're a JT Sanders, knock on wood, injury away from like tight end being a position that is a massive negative on this team. Like if JT Sanders was not in this room and it's just Gunnar Helm, Juan Davis, and Bayouth, and I guess the 2 true freshmen, Will Randall's probably not going to be healthy for the season. You're in a world of hurt. Even if Gunnar Helm goes down, you're kind of in a world of hurt. So that's why I agree with you. I think it'd be smart to go in the portal. Got to be doing that sooner rather than later too.
I don't think they're going after a tight end in the portal at this point. I think edge is the next priority here, but we'll see where it goes. Maybe someone steps up this fall, and maybe just fingers crossed we're healthy. Sorry for the negativity, y'all, on tight end, but I think we're thin here.
Yeah, I think it's just a fact of the matter. Like you have a chance to have an All-American. Obviously, this guy at Georgia named Brock Bowers is going to be tough to get that first-team All-American, but JT Sanders could certainly find his way up there. What is it, the Mackey Award? But behind that, there's definitely an issue.
Yeah, right. And, well, I think Gunnar Helm will be solid.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I mentioned, too, even if Helm went down and Sanders is still there, you're hurting because Sark likes to run 12 personnel. So that's why it does surprise me that a tight end hasn't been added or even looked at from what you're saying.
Anyway, tight end will be a position to watch. I'll be eager to see what that pecking order looks like in fall camp. And hopefully Will Randall makes a quick recovery or Spencer Shannon makes some serious strides this summer. Because I think Juan Davis at this point has been on campus for 3 years. Yeah. Okay, offensive line. I'll start at the tackles because first team group solidified. Calvin Banks, Christian Jones had a bang up spring. I thought there was a chance that a guy like Cam Williams could push Christian Jones. That did not happen. Props to Christian Jones, had a solid camp, staved off Cam Williams, even though Cam Williams himself had a really solid camp. Ended up getting shifted over to the inside, played right guard in the spring game with the first team. I don't know if Cam Williams is going to have a shot at the first team right guard spot this fall. My understanding is Kyle Flood still likes Cole Hudson there. But left guard, I think, is going to end up potentially being in competition. Hayden Connor getting the second team center reps. It's kind of like a junior Angulau situation where, Hayden Connor, I know he's a guy that's like super versatile. He can play almost every position along the offensive line. And it's clear that Kyle Flood is consistently looking for answers at center that's not Jake Majors. So whether that's, pinching blocking schemes or, finding someone else entirely to take reps at center.
The talent is there throughout the depth of this unit. It's just finding those guys and who's going to gel together. You mentioned I don't think there are any problems at the tackle positions. And Christian Jones having a good spring, as old as he is, I think that was really important because he didn't play until last year, really. So there's a reason for that. It took him a while to develop, and to see him continue that upward trajectory is definitely a good sign. To push off a guy like Cam Williams, who has a very bright future. You mentioned Cameron Williams started at right guard and ran with the ones. It's going to be a tough spot to break, but left guard, like you said, is a spot. I think. I mean, if we want to quickly go through that position, would it be left guard battle between like a Cam Williams, a Neto, and Hayden Connor? You could maybe throw Malik Ogbo in there. I don't even know. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys are pretty multiple. Um, okay, let's reset the interior offensive line talk
yeah,
for a second. I think left to right, I'm still gonna say Hayden Connor is probably your starting left guard opening day. I don't know though. I mean, I think he's potentially gonna be your starting center if he does enough, but I have no idea what Hayden Connor's movement is going to look like. But he's just too good, I think, compared to what else you have along the interior offensive line for him not to be a first teamer week one. I think they're still going to try him out at center for the fall. He was getting center reps multiple weeks in spring ball. I think the last 2 or 3 weeks in practice, second team reps at center in the spring game. So Flood is very serious about finding answers at the center position. Outside of Hayden Connor at left guard, I think Nato had a good spring. He's got a lot of talent. This could be a year where he steps up. But mind you, too, you still have DJ Campbell. You still have Cole Hudson. They were both injured. Cole Hudson can move around. DJ Campbell's grip on the offense yet isn't quite there to the point where I could say, like, you could super comfortably move him around. But he's just too talented to not be competing for a starting spot this fall. So, yeah, I would say at left guard, it's probably a mix of Hayden Connor, Nato Umeozulu still. And then you could potentially still see, you mentioned Malik Ogbo. He could still come on strong. Cole Hudson potentially being moved around. At center, I mean, Jake Major is still going to be a first teamer heading into the fall. But, I mean, I think that Flood's going to look for different ways to find guys like Connor Robertson and Hayden Connor to push them, just like you saw with Junior Angulau last year in fall camp, unfortunately, before Angulau got hurt. Do you have any kind of?
I think you got to get DJ Campbell in there somewhere. And that's not just, I mean, you mentioned the talent's off the charts, and he had some growing pains when he started to play last year, but I thought he started to come on pretty well towards the end of the season. And he's a guy, I mean, he can be a staple on the inside. I think the beauty, though, of this is I trust Kyle Flood, and these guys are going to battle it out, and I think he's going to make the right call. So it's one of those things, like, not to go on a tangent, but if you're an NFL fan, you just kind of have to trust your GM, Like when your GM drafts a quarterback in the top 10, he's tied to that guy. If the quarterback stinks, the GM's going to be gone, So you just kind of have to trust them unless you're in there watching them practice every day, which literally no one is unless you're a part of the team. So yeah, I'm going to trust Kyle Flood. That said, I would like to see DJ Campbell. I mean, Cole Hudson, obviously it was not a great story, but I mean, he proved himself by being one of the only offensive lineman to enroll early in the last class and immediately burst onto the scene. But he started to have some problems last year and wasn't very consistent. I think you can expect that out of a true freshman, but I just think it'd be something to look at. And I think that just because a guy started last year doesn't mean he should start this year as well.
I think Cole Hudson is going to make some strides this fall. And I mean, it's just the natural progression of things, especially with a guy as talented as Hudson or as skilled as Hudson. I mean, I think he is a good offensive lineman. I think he will be better. Probably will be a starter at right guard heading into week one because we got to see it more from DJ Campbell. I would agree, though. I think it's hard to keep DJ Campbell off the field this fall. I just have a hard time after the spring he had and not really proving it on the field to put him in that spot right now. But there's a lot to be decided. Tarek has said the entire spring that interior offensive line is not going to be decided till the fall. But we did get some pretty good intel this spring of what this group's going to look like. Right guard, I'm going to go ahead and say Cole Hudson number 1, DJ Campbell number 2, Cam Williams number 3. Actually, I'm going to say Campbell 2A, Williams 2B. I honestly think though that like Cam Williams has a good start to the fall, and if Williams has a good start to the fall, Campbell's still lagging behind. I think Williams could jump him pretty easily. I think they like what they see with Cam Williams right now. I mean, obviously, a huge body can move bodies off the line of scrimmage. Solid run blocker.
Yeah.
So, but offensive tackle, I think the backups you're looking at here probably at left tackle. I'd imagine it's either going to be Peyton Kirkland or Jaden Chapman. Peyton Kirkland was getting a lot of the second team run during the spring. Heard more about him in the early phases of spring camp, and then not as much down the stretch. But he still maintained those second team reps. Still a big body, I think. Ended up coming onto campus more ready to compete than most people thought. And I mean, you know what happens when Kyle Flood gets a guy on campus early and he impresses right away. He's going to have a leg up for the rest of the offseason. At right tackle, probably a competition between, I'd say backup. Yeah, I mean, Cam Williams probably still can be pushed to tackle. And then Malik Ogbo, I think, still there as well. Yeah, anything else for the offensive line?
No, I think Andre Kojo is a name to watch going forward. Not as an immediate impact guy this year, but down the line. I think from what I heard and saw, he progressed well. I think you mentioned it right there, getting these guys on campus early at the offensive line position is huge with what Flood can do with them, which is great to have a guy like Kyle Flood. Terrific recruiter, terrific technical guy, and I think one of the best, proven to be one of the best offensive line coaches in the country.
It's true. I mean, there's a lot of talent along the interior offensive line. It's just about putting it together. I think I'm set on the offense. I mean, I think some things have moved a little bit, especially along the offensive line, but yeah, I mean, I think we largely know what we're looking at on this side of the ball, but yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, we'll be coming back with part 2. Tarek will be joining us for the next round of this, but it's exciting to think that, time will fly this summer, I'm sure. And then before too long, we'll be talking about this team heading into fall camp. Anyway, for Andrew Miller, Shane Black at Hook'emHeadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Welcome.